Kelly Johnston. I'm Vice President of Government Affairs at the Campbell Soup Company, the proud owner of Pepperidge Farm. You are in one of the 9 Pepperidge Farm plants in the United States. This happens to be our flagship facility. Campbell Soup is an $8 billion global enterprise. Pepperidge Farm is $1.4 billion of that, our largest subsidiary of the Campbell Soup Company. We've got about 5,000 employees at Pepperidge Farm in the United States, most on the eastern seaboard. This is our largest plant. We've got about 800 employees here, and we are very honored to have Senator Pat Toomey and Congressman Joe Pitts here this afternoon. Talk about a program that's very important to Campbell Soup and Pepperidge Farm, and that's reform of the U.S. sugar program. Both these gentlemen have been leaders on trying to reform this antiquated program that artificially drives up the price of sugar for us. This company buys about 30 million pounds of sugar a year. When you are looking at prices in the U.S. that are between 64 and 92% higher than what we would pay if we were in Canada or Mexico or some other country, it tells you the competitive disadvantage that we are facing on a global scale. We have long urged Congress to reform the program so it works for American manufacturers and consumers, not just for one industry. Without further ado, let me just turn the plate over to Senator Toomey, Congressman Pitts, and then Corey Martin from the American Baker Association will come up after they're done. Senator?
Kelly, thanks very much for having us, and Congressman Pitts, thank you very much for your leadership on this important issue. We're here to talk about the joint effort that Congressman Pitts and I have underway in Washington and about which we're hopeful, and it's reforming this badly flawed sugar program. You may have seen in the paper recently a story about the USDA being scheduled to purchase 400,000 tons of sugar. That's American taxpayers are going to pay an above market price to buy a tremendous quantity of sugar, and then they're going to turn around and sell it at a huge loss to ethanol producers. This is all driven by this badly flawed program, the purpose of which is, as Steve mentioned, to artificially inflate the price of sugar for the benefit of a handful of wealthy sugar producers. This makes no sense at all. It's not fair to taxpayers to have to take these huge losses buying sugar at an artificially high price, selling it at an artificially low price. It's not fair to consumers. We're all consumers of sugar. We all go to the supermarket and buy foods that have sugars in them. And we all pay too much because of these programs. And finally, it's not fair to our workers. People like the folks at Pepperidge Farm, the confectioners around Pennsylvania. The Department of Commerce did a study on this, and they discovered for every job that the government sugar policy saves in sugar production, we lose 3 jobs in the manufacturing of food products that use sugar, because it is cheaper to make these products somewhere else in the world, almost anywhere else, because no one else forces their consumers to pay artificially high prices for sugar like we do. So I'll let Congressman Pitts talk about the measure he has in the House. I'm introducing companion legislation in the Senate. We came pretty close last year to pushing back some of the worst features of this sugar policy. Now we're going to take a run at it again. It's just not fair to taxpayers, it's not fair to consumers, and it's not fair to workers. So I'm going to stay at it until we can repeal a terrible program. Congressman Pitts?
Thank you, Pat. Thank you for your leadership in the Senate on this issue. As the Senator said, I've introduced companion legislation in the House. We have 55 co-sponsors. It's quite a bipartisan coalition. Everyone from Earl Blumenauer, very liberal Democrat from Oregon, Danny Davis, African-American leader in Illinois, Democrat, and then many of my colleagues on the Republican side as well. So I look for an opportunity to offer an amendment to the Farm Bill. As the Senator said, they came very close in the Senate, within 4 votes. With this bipartisan coalition in the House, it's very possible that we could win. I will offer an amendment when the bill comes, the Farm Bill comes up on the floor. And basically, we're trying to reform the sugar program. I'd like to eliminate all the subsidies, but we're targeting sugar in this legislation, and it adds to the cost of consumers about $4 billion a year. It has cost over 100,000 jobs in the United States in the last decade. The federal government should have to shell out about $80 million this year in sugar price support. And no other commodity, corn, wheat, soybeans, gets the government support that sugar gets. It's guaranteed, it's guaranteeing an already wealthy sugar growers, a producing small cadre industry, a certain price and profit at the expense of the sugar using industry, which includes Pepperidge Farm and the candy companies and all types of food companies around the country. So it's time to stop inflating the price of sugar by billions of dollars a year and put our people more on a level playing field with their competitors in other parts of the world. And I think we can get this reform this year, and so we're looking forward to that. With that, we'll take questions.
First off, I would like to thank Senator Toomey and Representative Pitts for taking a leadership position on pushing for sugar reform. This has been a program that's been a thorn in the side of the baking industry for literally decades now, and it's time that we have reform happen this year. Much has already been said about the impact of the sugar program on business, specifically on bakers and food manufacturers. The Department of Commerce, same study that was mentioned previously, has estimated that we've lost about 127,000 jobs in this country between 1997 and 2011, primarily because of the impact of the current sugar program. This is a job killer in the U.S., but it's not a job killer in other countries, so much so that the Canadian government has actually created a promotional brochure sent out to confectioners and bakers, urging them to move to Canada because, as they quote on the backside, you can receive 30 to 40% cheaper sugar, access to the world markets in Canada. What this is doing is this essentially incentivizes businesses to move offshore, move jobs offshore, and it's a job creator for Canada and other countries while it's killing jobs here in the U.S. And so with that, we're strongly behind the need to reform the sugar program. We feel that something needs to be done now before we continue to lose more jobs overseas. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, sure. So this mechanism came from somewhere and was put in place at one point for a reason. What's your understanding of that for those of us who aren't intimately aware? If you could sum it up, and then and I assume what you're going to say then is that it's no longer needed.
I would argue it never was needed. There's a handful of producers who certainly would love to have the benefit of a higher price of their product. They want to sell it for more. They don't want to have the risk of fluctuating commodity prices like other commodity producers have. And so they were able to persuade Congress to pass a law that guarantees them an income and an inflated price for their product. There's just never good policy. They were able to get a coalition together and they got it into law, and it's very hard to change law once it's established. But as Congressman Pitts pointed out, we've gotten very close recently, and I think we've got a real shot at it this year, so we're going to stay at it.
Of the things that Americans subsidize, am I getting it that sugar is among the most egregious in your view, to the extent that it is?
Oh, it would be definitely on the short list for me. If I worked at it, I might be able to come up with a worse example, but sugar's pretty bad.
Why are you focusing on sugar and not something like wheat or peanuts or?
Well, I would second Congressman Pitt's idea. I'd be in favor of ending those subsidies as well. But sugar is more concentrated, it's more egregious, it causes a bigger distortion in the market price for consumers, it costs us more jobs, and the money flows to fewer, wealthier producers. So for all of those reasons, I just think it's the most egregious of the various ag programs.
Is it getting worse with loss of jobs?
Well, the study that we have ended in 2011, I believe it was. So we don't actually have current data on the last couple of years. So I'm not sure of the answer to that, but the policy hasn't changed, so there's no reason to believe it's gotten better.
And why is it so important to keep these industries here, keep these jobs here, instead of outsourcing to places like Canada?
For all the reasons that Congressman Pitts and I spend most of every single day working on creating an environment for more job growth. We've got an unacceptably high unemployment rate. There's too many people looking for a job, can't find a job, working with a job that doesn't pay as much as they really need to get by. The last thing we can afford to do is be destroying good manufacturing jobs, food manufacturing jobs, and yet that's what we're doing. So we want to fix that.
And is it, oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, you got a very small group of producers, sugarcane in the south and beets in the Midwest, in the northern Midwest. Maybe a total of 5,000 people compared to hundreds of thousands in the using industries and losing over 100,000 jobs in the last decade. I mean, there's what we're trying to reverse. Keep those jobs here in the United States.
And I would just add, in addition to what Congressman Pitts just described, there's the fact that every single American has to go to the supermarket and buy food that's got sugar in it. And every one of us is paying more than we should be paying.
Yes, sometimes
That's not
almost
fair either.
double what they pay in other times.
What about, is it, it's affecting big business, obviously, but what about the small businesses? What about the small bakeries? How does that affect them? Is it putting them out of business?
I know a number of companies. I talked to my friend in Illinois. He said a number of his companies that were small had gone out of business. So yes, it is impacting them all the same way.
And the fact is, we've lost confectionery companies in Pennsylvania too. And it's because it's just increasingly hard to compete with a Canadian candy maker or a Mexican candy company because they get to buy sugar at the global market price instead of at these artificially inflated prices. All right, thanks very much, everybody. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, well, it's an example. I'll make you a